So authentic presence is necessary in order for us to present ourselves and be known. But then we also need to have the awareness of, now that I know who I am, now let me really get to know my customer so I can meet them with empathy and draw them closer together. Again, 95% of our purchase decisions take place in our subconscious, which is where our emotions are. The more we know ourselves, the more we're able to tell stories that emotionally resonate with our audience, and that's rooted in authenticity of who we are, not manipulation. There's a very fine line, and we need to proceed from this authentic place to avoid doing the manipulative work that a lot of other businesses are doing. When my husband left, that kind of opened the floodgates of just all this pain.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
So, Christene Marie, we talked about this prior. I don't even know what to say when we talk about who am I or who are you. It's amazing because I've done a ton of work, right? I've done a lot of work trying to identify who I am and what my past means and what is my purpose in this world. And I still get really confused. Like, let's say a friend or a mentor says, "Who are you?" I'm like, do I say I'm a son? Do I say I'm a boy? Do I say I'm a marketer? Or do I say I'm curious? Do I say I'm confused? Do I say that? How do we figure this? I know you're pretty much the expert on helping people figure out who they are and helping them show up in business. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because even someone who does the work wonders if I really know what I'm doing half the time.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you, Ben, for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And I so appreciate there's such a candor with your question. And it's even a humble one too. I think for so many of us, we don't want to ask questions like that. And so we frankly don't end up having the conversations that are absolutely necessary for us to get to the next level of our own growth, much less so be able to have a real connection with somebody else. Part of the reason why this question even matters of who am I, it matters, it feels almost so obvious in our personal life, but I want to talk about that, why it matters in our personal life, because it matters in business too. And I'll get to that in just a moment, but why this topic even matters in the first place. I'll just make it personal for me. I existed in my marriage for 8.5 years as kind of a non-person. And I was so focused on my husband and really wanted to be the kind of wife that he would be proud of, the wife that was modeled for me by my mom, the wife that the church espoused was the ideal. I just had all these subconscious narratives running my life that I had no idea about. And so because I was so much living in my subconscious, the conscious part of me was effectively offline. And so in so doing, I was mirroring and patterning who I thought I should be rather than connected with who I truly am. And my husband eventually left. And that's not necessarily why, but when I took radical responsibility of what do I need to do? How can I look in the mirror and assume, kind of taking the power away from, oh, I'm just a victim. He left me. Somebody else could leave me too. Then when something happens that's really devastating, we can look forward into the future with so much fear, because if we don't understand why they left or why this happened, if we're constantly sitting as the victim of our lives, fear is the only outcome and potential for the future. But if we take the power back and we're like, okay, what can I do? How can I change? What can I alter or adjust about that circumstance for the next time so that I can at least have a different data set that I'm looking at in analyzing? And sometimes it might take a few A/B tests, right? We kind of think of relationships. Okay, you date a couple people and then hopefully you end up with the right person. He was the first and only person I ever was with up until, after he left, I was in my late 20s. And then it was like, I felt like a 14-year-old kid. I was like, I don't know how to date. I don't know how to do this. And I'm 28 years old. This is so awful. And so it was such an experience of like, wow, this is scary. It's a scary dating world out there. But what it really allowed for me to do in looking in the mirror and assuming radical responsibility to ask that very question of who am I, it really allowed for me to curate my life with intention ensure that I moved every day in alignment now with not just an awareness of who I am, but also who do I want to be, because if we're so fixated on everyone and everything around us, we're actually not really able to be led to a destination that we want, that we're proud of. So when we look back at our life, that's why we hear so many people with regrets, because they weren't living consciously. They were living on autopilot in kind of default drivers that were trained to us in childhood. So that's kind of reason number one, is that real connection warrants two known people coming in and engaging from their true authentic selves. Apart from authenticity, real connection cannot occur. So my husband was effectively married to a phantom. And who wants to be in a relationship like that? And so that for me was my response to radical responsibility. Let me get to know who I am. Now, the business reason for why we need to know who we are, Harvard found that 95% of purchase decisions take place in our subconscious, which is where our emotions live. So again, kind of acting on default. For a lot of people, that's how we make decisions. And so for us as business owners, for us as the individuals behind the computer that are selling the brand, either whether that's, writing the sales copy, whether that's actually talking to the customer in the role of sales, whether that's actually being the entrepreneur who's the face of the business, you can look a whole myriad of different ways, but we need to establish an emotional connection. So authentic presence is necessary in order for us to present ourselves and be known. But then we also need to have the awareness of, now that I know who I am, now let me really get to know my customer so I can meet them with empathy and draw them closer together. So I just went on a whole little background and context for why this is important. And I didn't even answer your question. So should I pause or should I keep going with answering your question?
First, and tell me if I'm wrong, what a blessing that some things just don't go the way that we expected, but it gives us an opportunity to do this kind of soul searching. If anyone feels overwhelmed because we dived right in, this is such a blessing that we get to kind of look at our scars and kind of determine what are we going to do next. We have an opportunity here.
Then I feel that so much. Now my sister, just continuing with the deep dive, my sister was 26 and she and her husband had a 3-week-old baby girl. She is 5 years older than me, so I was 21 at the time, and her husband was killed by a drunk driver. And that was so devastating, 3-week-old baby, and just her husband was killed. There's something about, I didn't ever look at the scars at that time, and I just really moved into loving her and supporting her, and that's really necessary. Sometimes we actually need to activate because of trauma responses. However, because I never did the work to reconcile from that, I actually had this subtle, just deep-rooted sorrow in concert with how I was living for the majority of my 20s as well. And we need to look at the scars in order to ensure that we don't just have a Band-Aid over them, but by ripping off the Band-Aid, it'll be like, oh, that wound is actually more exposed than I thought and isn't even a scar. So if we have real scars, man, that's something that proves that we've done the work to allow for them to heal in a way that's proper, rather than, is it a scar or is it a Band-Aid? And I think that's something that we really need to analyze. I didn't ever heal from losing my brother-in-law. And it was when my husband left that kind of opened the floodgates of just all this pain that I had kept within. And at that time, when my husband left, I knew, looking at my sister and how she healed from the loss of her husband, because she did exactly what you just said. She looked at the pain, she confronted it, and allowed for the scar to form in the way it's supposed to. Scars are actually really helpful to bring the skin back together. That's necessary. And there's even this Japanese concept called kintsugi, which is this art form of taking broken pottery and using gold as kind of a lacquer to bring it back together and mend the pottery. So now the broken pieces are actually of more value because of the gold than they were before they were broken. So to your point of what a blessing, I knew, given how my sister had healed, that if I was willing to, Jordan Peterson talks about kind of moving through the pit of hell to get the keys of redemption. And so if we're willing to sit in the ashes of the pain and allow for us to go, that's when redemption is on the other side of that. And so now, because of me watching my sister do it, I hadn't done the work, but in so doing, I knew that redemption was on the other side. And I knew that there would be good good things coming on the outside of that, and waking up is probably the best and most wonderful thing I could have ever not wished for.
So I'm trying to figure out what to make of all this, because when I think of these different categories, I'm a firm believer that if you want something, you find someone who has it, you learn their playbook, and then obviously you want to audible and create your own plays, but success leaves clues. But then am I just following the footsteps of someone else? Am I just following the footsteps of what my parents told me I should want? Am I following in the footsteps of what my partner pokes at me? They're like, you shouldn't do that so much, this and that. Am I running away from trauma? Am I numbing myself? So I know this is like deep philosophical conversation, but when I try to figure out who I am, I feel like I'm all these things.
Yes.
And it's hard to put into words something that is so complex. Does that make sense?
I resonate with what you just said so much. And I think it is all of it. When I think about my own journey of coming to know myself, then I actually shut out a lot of voices.
Mm.
And I really, I turned off podcasts. I actually haven't listened to podcasts consistently since before my divorce. And I'm actually excited to start doing that again. I really stopped listening to a lot of music, and I allowed for a lot of silence. And obviously it depends on what your home environment is, but decreasing the amount of inputs when we have a lot to process. I think of it as an information processing system. So like our inputs come in, the processing takes place in this information processing system, and then it impacts our outputs. So if we're looking at the outputs of our lives and we're like, there's inconsistency there. I actually don't like how I'm showing up here. All right. I don't like that. I'm saying, and this was a practice that I did back when I turned 30, I wrote my eulogy. And I wrote down, how do I want to be remembered at the end of my life? And then I analyzed it and used it as a mirror. I used my eulogy as a mirror, and I was like, okay, where am I not living today to get me to this place? And so that's very much so kind of like a self-analysis. And I think that this self-analysis and self-audit is so critical. That's one way to do it. Okay, what's my eulogy? What are my inputs? What is currently feeding me? Because y'all, we talk about we're the sum of the five people. We're the sum of, someone said this one time and I thought it was so brilliant. We're the sum of the energy that we're around. And I don't like the woo. Frankly, I'm not like in that community. I'm much more so in the entrepreneurial community. However, I've heard ripples of things that are like really, really resonate with me. And so I don't want to excuse it and be binary because of a category that I might judge that as. So I'll say energy. And what I mean by energy is that I get, I have a reaction to whatever that is. So gossip, I actually have a reaction to when people gossip. I have a reaction to a TV show. Either it's really life-giving and funny and fills me with a lot of joy, or it's actually kind of crass and can draw me down. Same with the friends that we're with. Same with even just the choices we make of how we're going to spend our time to go eat at a certain place. I've walked into restaurants, Ben, and I've actually left because I'm like, I actually just really didn't like how I was engaged with by the hostess, and I don't have to stay because immediately I shifted. So much of energy, and I say that in quotation marks for those listening, energy, so much we need to assess what's my response to whatever that stimulus is. So there's this quote by oh golly, I've been talking about him for the last couple weeks. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor
Frankl, yeah.
Yep. He was in a couple concentration camp, but specifically Auschwitz. And he had this comment: between stimulus and response is choice. And y'all, that's another audit for us. So we're looking at our eulogy. Who do I want to be? We're looking at our inputs. We're analyzing, what is my response to the stimulus in my life? Am I living in accordance and responding in accordance with who I say that I want to be at the end of my life? Maybe I actually need to change the stimulus as much as I can. So we can't control other people, but we can control a number of our inputs that are coming from our phones and podcasts that we listen to. So to your question of like, man, how do I know who I am is who I am versus my parents. So much of that for me, Ben, came through the silence, but also it came from this framework that I kind of conjured as a result of revisiting the process that I went through. There were 3 questions that I asked that included this framework. The first is, who was I? We have to understand our past to understand how it informs our present. So really diving into what are the core memories that I have?
Mm.
And really, y'all, like, I mean diving into them. How did I feel? Visualizing what happened, who was there, what did they say to me? And then understanding, okay, I had a core belief about the world develop as a result of my family member spanking me at 3 years old when I had Lyme's disease in my knee. Nobody knew. And I learned a belief was formed that if I cry or show negative emotion, I'm going to be punished. That was a core belief that manifested itself in my marriage and really kind of helped with the disillusionment of it because I never had any kind of intelligence around my emotions. I just shut them off, stuffed them down, and thought that by just ignoring them, that was the better way of dealing with it than confronting it. And so that's an example of understanding how how the past shows up in the present. And we have to do that work. So in terms of really understanding how am I today, who's the one in the driver's seat, we really have to trace the roots back. And I would say, Ben, that that's engaging in the silence and stillness and then asking why of different emotions and responses that I have to that stimuli,
Mm.
to those inputs, and just taking the time to pull aside and ask why of those, because there's usually a memory that hasn't been then moved through and an emotion that hasn't been processed.
So the 3 main questions. The first was, who was I?
Yes.
And doing an exploratory adventure on what that possibly means and how that created who I am. What were the other 2 questions, just to clarify, like the main 3?
The second is, who am I? So translating that into, okay, that shows up here and being really specific how that shows up. So I had an experience with one of my sisters a couple months ago, and it was really, really helpful understanding that when I was little, I didn't feel like I was wanted by my other siblings.
Mm.
And so today, the mindset that I actually have to combat is that I'm not wanted. That's like this mindset that is very, very deep in my subconscious. And so something happened with my sister, and I was extra sensitive to it because I felt like I wasn't wanted. So that's really helpful, because if we understand how the past is showing up today and who am I, now I can put that experience in proper perspective. So understanding the past puts the present into perspective. And what it also allows is the proper attribution of the pain. Because if I'm in relationship with somebody, they do something, it's my response is likely tied to something that's not to do with them at all. Sure, maybe that was unkind, but it blows up so much bigger because I haven't done the work to process my own stuff. So that's question number 2 is, who am I? That's more so the mindset. What was the memory or moment in the past? Who was I? What's the mindset in the present? And then who do I want to be? What's the new mantra? So I'm not wanted is the current mindset. So what's the new mantra? And it could be, I am wanted, but I've gone through, there were 7 or 8 actually different moments, mindsets and mantras that I've developed and really created for myself. And for example, that whole topic and little story about getting spanked when I was 3, teaching me that, the new mindset was I shouldn't have negative emotions. Well, that's the current mindset. Well, the new mantra is I want to be vulnerable. I actually want to honor every time I do show emotion. So it's a complete reframe. So it's not just I want to have positive emotion. It's no, I actually want to be vulnerable and I want to show up really authentically. That doesn't mean they're both very different. Authenticity and vulnerability are very different. Vulnerability is probably where there's not a real scar yet. It's maybe more so a wound that we're working through. Vulnerability for me is something that I need to engage with really tenderly, because what has happened is that I've talked about it maybe too soon with people who weren't safe, and that reopened the wound in a deeper way, because we're effectively giving people power in over that vulnerability, over that wound. And so they need to be the right people, whereas authenticity is like, here are my scars, man. And it's not the rehearsed story about the scars. That's not authenticity. Authenticity is really being so present here in the now. We can't be authentic without being present.
Mm.
And so being able to share our story and being able to be so connected with how I am here in this moment. And even I told you, Ben, like, I'm outside. One thing that's really helped me with presence is just hearing the wind in the trees. Noticing this morning, I walked out on my porch and I was like, I really love the color green of my tree. It's really pretty and it's a different green than the other greens. There's something about activating our senses that brings us into the here and now.
Mm.
So that's the second. And then the third question is, who do I want to be? And that's where the eulogy comes in, and it serves as a mirror. And this practice called vertical alignment is something that I engage with every single morning. I take about 60 to 90 minutes, but you can do it in a shorter span of time. That is effectively the practice of presence.
Mm.
And that's my journaling time. That's where I consider, like, okay, I have an acronym, ALIGN. So A is awaken. Okay, I'm going to literally awaken my body because it's early in the morning. And then the body is something that because I grew up in the Christian church, body was something that was like almost to be damned. And it's like, well, I guess you've got a body, but it's not to be celebrated, or it's kind of something to be ashamed of. So I'm working on that now of just, man, like, I'm so grateful that I have legs that work. I'm so grateful for my hair, just like things like that, where it's so easy to live in a state of dissatisfaction.
Sure.
And so this part of awakening the body is like, man, what a blessing that I have this healthy body. And actually, health is the number one pursuit that we all should have, no matter if you're an entrepreneur or a mother, father, whatever your role is in life, that's your primary role. Health is the number one thing, because then you're never going to do any of your other roles right.
Can I pause on that real quick?
Yeah.
When you're talking about we're the average of the 5 people, but it's more of the 5 energies, and I almost feel like we're the average of the healthiness that we're surrounded by.
Oh, I love that.
Are the human beings, so whether they're a basketball player, a ballet, whether they're a scientist or an artist, are they healthy to be around?
Wow. That's so good.
It's kind of combining the two, because we're not the average of the 5 professions we hang out with. We're the average of the 5 energies, and really just the way that, and what's healthy to, there's certain things that are common, like you don't want to be morbidly obese, but what's healthy environments for one person is very different than the next.
Yes. I so appreciate you bringing that up. And there's different, so I think of kind of our life focus areas. So let's say financial, let's say business, let's say marriage, family with our children. There's different people who represent health in different categories. It's really hard to find one, unicorn human in all of them. And so I really love that, the health. So who's at the pinnacle of each one of those categories, and who's going to effectively be a mentor? And it can be a podcast.
Sure.
But I really love that. I really love that perspective.
So to riff with you for a moment, I love the 3 questions, because I'm a firm believer that you can be and become simultaneously. What I mean by that is you're good enough now and you're only getting better. You're perfect as you are. Oftentimes you already have all the skills, and we're like podcasting or reading our way just to avoid doing what we know we need to do, which we're capable of doing already. But when you think about where did I come from? Who am I? And like, who am I becoming, or where am I going? All 3 categories is still you.
Yes.
It's not 3 separate people.
Yes.
So if you determine, you want to look at your past, you want to determine who am I now, and you could be totally happy and be like, I'm just going to become better at what I currently am. But then there's that aspirational aspect. And to me, there's no shame in any of those 3 questions. This is where I came from. This is where I am now. Maybe I have a scar here. Maybe I have an open wound that needs to be stitched up. Where am I going?
Yes.
So I really think it's actually far more practical than people might think. It's very simplified if you really think about it.
Yes, and taking the time. I think that that's the thing that I really would want to harp. Take the time, make the time, schedule the time, because it's not going to come to us. I'm sure we all know what that's like. We've got our task list that's never ending. And y'all, radical action for me looked like waking up at 4 every morning to get this time in because the world.
I'm never gonna do that.
But radical action for you might be actually scheduling, put on your calendar 12 to 1 every day. You know, that's like over lunchtime. And technically, I'm sure your team would like to have a little break from hearing from you over lunch. So that could be the time that you take to go for a walk. I forget who I was talking to. He was a pretty well regarded CEO. And he said that every day at noon, he went for a decently long walk. And he actually would have his therapist call every like Wednesday, Thursday, or something like that. But he had it scheduled so that even when his therapist wasn't calling, he was doing that. And that was his time to process, because otherwise our filtration system breaks. We've got too many inputs and we don't have the time necessary for the processing to take place. And then our outputs are not in alignment with what we want. And there's two things that I want to add based on what you said that I so appreciated. It's not that difficult. When we look at who we want to be, it's all powered by this sense of gratitude. My friend last year, he was like, you need to read The Gap and the Gain. It's such a good book. It's by Dr. I want to say Benjamin Hardy. Isn't that who it is? Ben Hardy and
I know the name.
Dan Sullivan. Yep. Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy.
Got it. Yeah.
They the book is effectively, we look at where we are today and we measure success by looking backwards rather than looking forward. So it's, wow, look at how far I've come. That's living in the gap versus the gain of I'm here and look at how far I've got to go. So actually there's something really beautiful in looking at all three questions, because it allows for us to live in the gain of, man, look at how far I've come. I'm so excited. And now gratitude is what propels the future rather than the fear of lack or the fear of failure or whatever it is. It's, man, powered by gratitude. It's only an addition. The change, the future manifestation of what might come is only in addition to where I am today. And I'm just so grateful right now because look at how far I've come. And that's really important.
Literally yesterday, a team member made a mistake. We're going to miss deadline. I was semi-livid and I'm remained calm and understanding and far more. I mean, I needed to remain empathetic because getting angry wasn't going to solve the problem.
Yes.
And 2 days prior, I might have said something rude.
Wow.
So literally just making one tiny change at 3 days prior, I might have been pissed, but I did a breathwork session and I was able to keep my emotion down. Like that is even that little win's a huge gain.
That's such a huge gain. Ben, can you talk about the breathwork session? I love that.
Well, so I've been kind of cheating on my practice, but
I won't tell it.
I meditate every morning. Sometimes it's literally like I'm just going to take 8 breaths. I'm going to count to 8, square box breathing. And then other times I do full-fledged like hour-long sessions. And breathwork's a beautiful thing because I know daily meditators that do an hour a day for 30 years. I haven't been able to accomplish that. I've done like 45 seconds a day for 10 years, but sometimes I do. But my body starts to tell me that I need it. And then I put on.
Like, what does that look like?
That's a very good question. I could probably figure out an answer to it. I think it's kind of intuitive.
Yeah.
I'm getting kind of stressed. My calendar's full and it's going to remain full regardless. So there's like this need to do, accomplish, check all the boxes. And I'm like, I need to just not look at the boxes and check this other box.
Yes.
It's hard to explain. It's just, I know because I start to feel tired. I start to get irritable, things like that. And it's like, I need to spend more time with myself.
Yes, that's your sign. And man, so going back to the Align acronym for vertical alignment, that morning practice, the breath work is exactly what would be included in that awakening the body, because the better we can get in tune, to your point, the more we can circumvent an explosion. The goal is that we're in the driver's seat at all times, not our parents, not an angry emotion, not fear. We are true self as we were created to be before the world kind of gets a say in it. That's the beauty of this morning ritual. Exactly what you just said is so that you're the one who you can sense and know your body well enough to tune in before it has an outburst, because sometimes it's like the little kid in us is like waving its hand. And if we're not listening, then we're gonna not be in control.
And it's easy to feel like a victim when it's like, why the F is this happening? And then
Yeah.
some person who does one small thing and it puts you over the edge.
Yes.
And they're like,
Yes.
what happened?
Exactly. Well, and it's the same, y'all. It's the same thing with like that example with my sister.
Yeah.
She did something and it triggered a very deep wound for me. And she's like, what the heck? Like, what I did wasn't that bad. And then you get more angry because you're like, no, it is bad because I'm feeling this way.
Mm.
And so the goal is that we're able to self-regulate and self-soothe. So we know when we're getting out of regulation and we know how to bring us back into regulation. Because otherwise, we're going to run rampant in these emotionally unhealthy businesses. Our partnerships are going to be destroyed. We're going to lose clients because God forbid they give a criticism when we're unhappy, or we're going to lose employees. There's so many outcomes, or worse yet, lose our partner. Lose our family.
Yeah.
Or, this is probably the worst, but we lose ourselves. We live the majority of our life not awake. So I love what you said about the breath work. That's such a good practice, and something that even the children can do with us if you guys have kids, because them being able to self-regulate their emotions, that's probably one of the most loving things a parent can train their child to do is self-regulate.
Well, as an example for kids or anyone who's like, this seems kind of soft, there's like warrior style breath works that are like, it's kind of like a warrior going into battle. And it's like, maybe you do breath work before a big game. Like,
Yes.
our breath is such a strong tool that it doesn't have to be this, like, it doesn't have to be ooey gooey. We can use it to throttle energy into our body and go crush something as well.
Yes.
Whatever you need.
I love it. And really harnessing, I think that that's actually such an interesting point. Knowing how to harness our body, our emotions. So thinking about emotional intelligence, we've got intellectual intelligence, we've got emotional intelligence. We also have our physical intelligence. Our body, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score by, I think it's Bessel van der Kolk. I think that's his name, Bessel van der Kolk. And he's the one that came up with the term PTSD. And so our bodies literally are very powerful machines, vessels, whatever word you want to say, powerful entities that have the ability to power us forward, to guide us in really dangerous ways. Some of the addictions that you can have, this craving in your body for something and the mind, but being able to harness for good, that's alchemy at its finest.
So for the next stretch here, and I'm being facetious when I say this feels like a lot of work. How is this actually going to make my business better?
Yes, I love that question. So there's a few different elements that I've used for our teams, our clients, and then also for myself. What I will say is that the more work we do to know who we are, the clearer we are about what we want and what our vision is for our business, and also what we uniquely are called to do. Ben, you said this. We were joking about starting a random side business, and you were like, no, I'm going to stay in what I know my expertise is.
Yeah.
That's coming from a very, you're living in the game. If you're living in the gap and you actually are like, oh, I'm already not doing enough. Yeah, maybe I need to start a new, but you know what I mean? Maybe I need to start a new business, or maybe I actually need to partner here. Operating from the gain mindset allows for us to proceed with a certain surety and a certain alignment and confidence that is necessary for us to lead well. So not only is our vision clear, but we're also able to lead from a place that allows for people to feel seen as a result. Again, 95% of our purchase decisions take place in our subconscious, which is where our emotions are. The more we know ourselves, the more we're able to tell stories that emotionally resonate with our audience and thus secure emotional connection that's rooted in authenticity of who we are, not manipulation. There's a very fine line, and we need to proceed from this authentic place to avoid doing the manipulative work that a lot of other businesses are doing. So it allows for the stories, it allows for the emotional connections, and it also allows us to connect with our employees, which allow for tenured retention and them to be really loyal to you and to the mission. Because again, the more that we're clear on what our mission is, the more we're able to rally people who are the best in class, but also really tied to the mission so that when Meta comes calling for what is it, $50 million bonus for AI development, they're not going to be, they're probably going to go for that. But you know what I mean? Like they're not going to be as easily swayed because they feel an emotional compulsion to the mission in and of itself. And there's something about that that actually, it kind of kills ego. You know, if we're hoping that they'll stay for us because of how great we are, that's ego talking. Having a mission outside of you allows for people to come. Yes, hopefully they love you because you're such a good leader. And if they're tied to the mission, there's a semblance of relief in that because you don't have to be perfect. You can actually lead by example of saying, I'm having a rough day. And they're like, oh man, even our leader, that's really beautiful. And the human to human connection. Whereas if you're thinking that they're just there for you, that's a lot of pressure to perform.
So I want to get incredibly tactical, and you can take it any way you want, but we've all like read a social media post that just sounds like word vomiting, or a website that's designed and it just seems a little bit all over the place. It's not, or even a leader that like has big vision but is struggling to communicate it because not everyone in the organization understands all these terms and these. So like we need to properly communicate and market and brand. How do we do that? Because it's easy just to be like, I authentically know myself, but I need to be able to communicate that to the people that are going to buy from me, right?
Yes. Yes. So I want to give just one example of actually somebody sent me a testimonial. It's about 7 minutes long. It was really, really cool about how they did this. So I'm going to talk to you about what they did.
Cool.
And they've been closing a lot of customers as a result. So what they've done is in their sales calls, they'll lead with their story and their why. And that is, it sounds like, well, obviously, but that's where you use the knowing framework. So because of story, and then you say what your service offering is and your mission. Therefore, this is what I'm going to do for you.
The only reason I'm laughing is this is literally what I do.
Really? I love it. Okay, then tell your story. Let's share your experience. I love this. This is great.
I don't need to go into the whole thing, but the shortened version, just for the tactical points, is I was a huge music advocate, and I loved podcasts. And it was like 2015, and a podcast was a university on wheels. So I basically started a local music podcast because I wanted to get into places for free. And then I was doing this music show for 4 years straight. And when the pandemic hit, I was actually a sales executive for corporate for a marketing firm. But I had just started in my role. So I was the last one in, first one out, got let go during the pandemic. So then Music Ben was broke, unemployed, and literally non-essential because the music industry shut down. So I had to become Business Ben. And Business Ben might be an entrepreneur. He doesn't really know yet. So then I started a Rochester business podcast to learn from local leaders. Same thing, but instead of a music show, a business show.
And
that gave me the 5 people. That gave me the information. That taught me what I needed to know to launch a business. And I had learned local SEO and web design and digital marketing. So I was selling what I knew in prior firms. But it wasn't until people slapped me in the face and said, Ben, all your networking connection, like you've podcasted forever and all your clients come through networking, personal branding, podcasting. Why are you selling websites? Why aren't you doing what you did for yourself for other people? So nowadays, that's what I do. I have a podcast agency, and we built a community for the peer-to-peer support. We all grow together because I'm having great conversations. I want to bring other people into the conversation And literally, like, I do none of the talking because the community builds itself.
Ben, that's exactly, that's a perfect example of what it's supposed to be. Y'all, I was tied into that story. I was emotionally engaged. I laughed. I felt bad when he lost his business. I had many emotional peaks and valleys while he was telling his story. And that's good branding. That is a pinnacle example of what you want to be able to say, something along those lines when you're in your sales calls, in your content on your website. Don't be afraid of showing up. I was teaching a master class a couple months ago, and we started off and no one knows who I am. So, I'm like, well, let's pretend like we're in third grade. What's your superpower? People were not thrilled. And so they were very reticent to share. By the time that, the third, fourth, fifth person was sharing, people were like, oh, I love that. And they were getting emotionally engaged. And there were stories, and people were like, oh man, I went through something like that too. Now we're dialoguing, where when we first started, it was like pulling teeth. People wouldn't have their cameras on. And so by the end of it, I said, okay, I want each one of you to go to your websites, go to your social media, go to your email campaigns. Where are you and your superpower showing up? Not a single person had their superpower anywhere, because that superpower is them and their differentiator between them and everybody else. So y'all, why Who Am I matters. That is the thing, especially with AI, that is going to pluck you out from everyone else and allow for your content and your brand to stand on its own 2 feet, because it's powered by real, true soul of who you are. And then it's the strategy of execution that allows for it to be done so according to best practices, whatever the platform or channel is. So what Ben just shared is a prime example of what every single person should be able to do. And Ben, to your point, your original question of, I've got all these different parts, essentially, all these different areas of giftings. Then we tailor each story for each. So we want a story that represents each value that we hold.
Yeah.
We want a story that allows for each element of our lives. So, I've got a story around my book. I've got a story around the movie I was in 2022. All these little parts of me that are very kind of different from each other, and like, how do they all fit together? But the more we know ourselves, the more we're able to curate and pull out a story. But it takes a willingness and a bravery to take up space and talk about it.
Mm.
And Ben, I'm still working on that, to be honest with you. I can get on a podcast and do it, but when I'm with a friend or when I'm with even my family, it's really hard for me to still take up space. I would much rather be the one asking the questions, because if I'm sharing, then I could be judged. So that judgment, fear, holds a memory and an unprocessed emotion with it, right? So when I go and do the work and trace that down, it's like, oh, I'd rather hide and not be known, because when I was known, I wasn't liked. Now, granted, who's the subset? That was the man who left me. So I need to take that into consideration too, right? So y'all, this is why doing the inner work that Ben's talking about of breath work allows for us to show up in business with a confidence that is necessary to take the stage that is necessary to be seen for our mission to be accomplished in our lives.
Whew. And the only one thing I'd add
Mm.
is I stopped caring so much.
Yes,
I started.
I love that. That's so good.
I
Yes.
started working on myself, and I'm a vulnerable person. I'm very shy. But I stopped care. Like, I've learned, it's not that I don't care. I've learned to laugh at my own stupidness. Like, I was on stage and I had a speech impediment when I was a kid, and suddenly I said R's twice. I said my R's wrong twice in 30 minutes. And the second time I paused for what felt like an hour, but was like 6 seconds. And then I realized that if I didn't keep talking, nothing would happen because everyone was looking at me. But that doesn't have to define. I've learned to laugh at that. Like, wow, Ben is kind of all over the place sometimes.
I love that. Ben, I love that so much. I'm so grateful. What a beautiful addition. I could not agree more. Y'all, so Ben, we were talking about this very briefly. Oh no, my internet got a little funky. I'm going to close out my Slack. We were talking about this beforehand, and we were talking about the masculine and feminine, and I'm not talking about male and female. I'm talking about kind of the IQ is more masculine and the EQ is more feminine. And there's something about if we actually are getting in touch with that EQ and knowing what's going on in our emotions, it also allows and unlocks this kind of childlike play where the masculine is kind of stepping aside and like, all right, we're going to play. We're going to be willing to be goofy. When we look at kids, they will ask why 1,000 times and never stop. And you were like, for the love of God. And they're so curious and there's no judgment. And so as we put judgment to the side, we allow for play to come with just this really beautiful ease. And in that element of play, we're not judging ourselves because when we're caring about what other people think, I think at the end of the day, we're caring what we think about us. Like we've got this little judgmental voice in our own mind. It's not even anybody else. It's really us. So I think that at the end of the day, it's stop caring what people think, but it stems and starts with us not caring for ourselves and being a really gentle place to land, rather than a harsh judge.
Harsh one, yeah. I have one huge question. I don't know if we have time for it. So
yes, we do. Let's go for it.
I want to first ask, how do we get more Christene? What should I do next to like have Christene in my world, whether it's listening to your podcast or hiring? You tell us.
Well, if you go to verticalalignment.com, you can sign up for 21 days just of vertical alignments. I did it for my 32nd birthday. And it's the one thing that the Knowing Retreat attendees, I've hosted 4 retreats over the last years. I did a couples retreat, a men's retreat, women's retreat. It was the one thing that people were like, how do I make sure that when I leave here, I continue to grow and evolve and I don't go back to these old patterns? And so it's taken me a year to do this, but I finally was like, okay, I'm just going to do 21 days of vertical alignments. And I never even finished the acronym. But you'll find out if you want to do it. That's one way. If you really want to start this process and just 21 days, 3 weeks, build a little bit of a habit of doing the work and tuning in with your body, your emotions. And then it's, I give a prompt every day for us to go back and revisit our childhood, go back and question, who am I today and who do I want to be? So it's really in concert with the Knowing framework. And then otherwise you can just follow me on socials, Christene Marie. And I spell my name a little funky, Ben, Christene, Christene Marie.
We'll make sure people can find it. All right. It's in the resources, the notes below.
Great.
I have a huge question. I don't know. Can I ask a huge question?
Yes, I'm very intrigued.
I might open a little bit of a rabbit hole, but we had talked about this a little bit prior and it's been on my mind. And I already know this.
Okay.
I know that AI can't replace us like as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
We are all unique. But I'm curious how we can properly, or your thoughts on properly partnering with AI.
Yes.
In a small example, there used to be a day where I took my why story, I wrote it out, I tried to make sure it sounded good. And then I posted it, and it was 100% my words and Ben. And nowadays, I can have ChatGPT do that for me in 6 seconds.
Yes.
So I'm afraid that by partnering with AI, we might lose who we are.
That's so good. I have taken a lot of time to train ChatGPT for me and my voice. And I actually have, my company has an AI bot, but I have my own personal account. And it knows me so well, but y'all, that takes time to train. So it takes time to know who we are, and then it takes time to train the bot. Because, Ben, I was going live the other day. I had a conversation lined up with I think it was a foundation repair company. We were going to do a podcast together. And they weren't able to join. So within I think it was within 60 seconds, I posted on ChatGPT and I was like, give me the 3 principles of knowing and the 3 practices for building a brand. And it knew, so I fed it every single one of my social posts. Yeah. I feed it my emails. I feed it my website. I feed it what I'm building, and I fed it my book. So it knows me so well. But I wrote my book by myself, and then I wrote my social posts for the first year, and then I backfilled all that content, and then I'll still write my social posts. What I'll do is I'll actually talk into my phone to allow for curiosity and creativity to expound rather than worrying about the words that are coming on screen. So I'll either talk into ChatGPT or I'll talk into a Word doc and say, I want to talk about this story. I felt this way. And then I'll kind of move through my own social process. But it needs to be originated from us and then let the GPT do the editing. It's so much more efficient. I have no problem with that, but we need to feed it our authentic stories.
So if part of who I am is really bad at grammar, it's okay if ChatGPT takes care of that.
Well, and that's actually, maybe you actually say that. Maybe you actually say that ChatGPT, like, I'm bad at grammar. I don't want this to be perfect. And I think that that's actually really beautiful, Ben, because there's one thing in feeding the GPT, you're feeding it to sound like you. So if it does its job and you're feeding it all of your old history that might even have a misspelling here or there, if you're not afraid of that, I would say keep the integrity of your voice. I love that. I think that's so human. And the goal is that we don't AI everything for the purpose of making it perfect.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we really need to be clear on. The perfection is not the goal. It's progress and moving forward is the goal. You know, that it's alchemizing what we're already doing for the purpose of more, you know, to bless the world with more of Ben.
More of it. You know, by the time this goes out, the post will already exist, but I'm imagining a tagline like written from the soul by Ben, grammar editing by ChatGPT.
I love that.
Adding it, just putting it in there.
I think that that's so fun. And that's so honest, right? People want authentic connection. And it can be helped and aided with AI, but even calling that out, I think that that's so fun.
Probably
so I
gonna do that today. Well, I gotta go write that post. I know you've got a team to work with. Tell us one more time how we can support you because we want to do that.
Thank you. Well, if you actually want to support, join my book launch team. It will probably be like a month or two, maybe 3 before the book comes out, but I'd love for you to join my book launch team and get the book early, tell me your thoughts, and help me get the word out.
It'll be closer and closer to the launch by the time this comes out. So
Okay.
offline, send me some info. I can share it with my network. And if anyone's hearing this after the book, it's available. But we want people to get the book is the point.
Yes, we want people to get the book. And to be honest, Ben, I'm still even figuring that out. So I'll let you know. Maybe we'll give the book for free to your community as a downloadable PDF. So the goal
as a I was gonna say be careful because
not
there's like
that.
there's like a few billion people listening right now. So
then there is so much. This is where we have to know our mission. Knowing our mission allows for us to make the decisions that aren't perhaps the most monetary based, but it allows for us to be like, you know what? People don't even need to pay for this. I just get it and consume it and allow for yourself to be transformed like I was. That's the power of knowing, and that's the power of knowing our mission.
Thank you for this conversation. We had talked about it like a year ago. We made it happen, and now I'm going to want to have you back as quickly as possible, so I appreciate it.
I hope so. Ben, thank you. This was wonderful.
We'll talk soon.